Hey guys, welcome to another episode of SEO Questions and Answers. Today we're going to look at the question, do I consider rebuilding a horrible website that is not getting any traffic or conversion part of SEO? Some people would probably say, strictly speaking, no. SEO deals only with rankings and not the visual elements of it. I would tend to say yes, just because to me, while conversion rate optimization is technically a separate discipline than SEO, I consider them so mutually beneficial, so a part of each other, that often when I do one, I really mean the other as well. So I would say yes, if you have a site that's very dated looking, the design of it just does not create the impression that this is a high-end business, if it feels cheesy, if it looks amateurish, if it's just confusingly laid out, if it's too busy, if it's not as mobile friendly as it could be, any of those things will crush your conversion rate on your website. And I don't feel like if you're trying to do SEO on the site in any earnest measure, I don't feel like you can ever say that you're doing a good job if you're not addressing the one part of it, because that overused analogy of pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, why would you do that? And that's essentially what you're doing every time you put a ton of effort into your SEO with a terrible looking website that, as you said, is not converting. A website that is not compelling is not going to magically become compelling just because you now have 10 times the number of visitors that you had 6 months ago. You may still get some conversions because it might be the reality your site converts at, say, 0.5%. And so getting 10 times the amount of traffic, well, 0.5% of that still will be more leads than you had before. So you can trick yourself into thinking, see, the SEO solved the problem. But the reason conversion rate optimization is such a great thing to invest your time in, SEO is comparatively a slower game. Nothing you're going to do today is probably going to make a ranking difference that changes everything for you tomorrow. It'll probably take some time to get out there. But if it's a wording change or a design problem that is turning people off to your site today, it is something that if you address that right now could make a meaningful difference this week as people are coming to your site. And that can end up generating a much faster sense of reward for your efforts, because if your website is actually already getting a decent amount of traffic and you're losing a lot of those leads, doubling your conversion rate from, say, 1% to 2%, or from 3 to 6%, if you've made enough changes to warrant that kind of an improvement, depending on how many visitors you're getting, that could end up meaning a lot as far as extra leads coming to your site. And those are the kind of changes that when you get them right and you really hone that in, you could end up looking at analytics or looking at the number of phone calls or lead forms that you're getting and saying, wow, that really helped. And so those are the kind of reasons that I say I always look at them as technically a part of SEO, even though others would argue it's not, just because they so belong together and it so matters when you're doing SEO that I won't even, for instance, work on websites that I honestly believe we're up against too much without making that recommendation. And so if a business came to me and said, I want to hire you to do SEO for us, and I looked at the site and thought to myself, this design is awful, I'm not going to take the job to do SEO without making the recommendation to them. I actually think what you need to do next is redesign parts of this. If it's built on something I can do parts of that, I will. If it's not, I'm going to recommend some developers for you. This is a necessary step. But I only do that when it's necessary, because the rest of the time I'm looking at a site saying, if the site is decent, there's no reason we have to constantly redesign the site every 6 months, every year. Like a lot of agencies will make it feel to businesses like they do. I'll instead say, no, this design is fine. What we need the most is carefully crafted content that's in this design, and we need to do a lot of optimization to boost the traffic. Let's not do it where it's not warranted, but sometimes, yes, it is definitely warranted, and you'll definitely get a benefit from it. But I would say be very clear about what your site is not doing well before you do a design, so that you don't end up in a scenario where you're just redesigning for the sake of redesigning. And I've seen that happen for business owners before, where they know their site's not as good as it could be, but because it's not really clear to them where it's failing, when they pay somebody to redesign it, they end up with just another design that's more of a lateral move. It's like the design is different, and it's not necessarily doing certain things better, and so they don't get any benefit from that. So you have to be very clear on, this is cluttered, it looks dated, the color tones are bad, the readability is bad, whatever it is, so that when you're designing the site, you can say, these are specific things we want to improve upon, and we're not going to launch this until we look at that design and can say definitively, yes, this has made a big difference on readability or on looking modern or on looking legit. We're really pleased with that. That's going to solve this problem. Hope that was helpful, guys. Shoot me your questions, see if we can make them into a video going forward, and otherwise stay tuned for the next episode.